Hi everyone, I'm Leondy Harmono, and today me and my group mates will be explaining the three different economics monetary measurement tools between GDP, GNI, and PPP, as well as main applications. First, we will start off the video with Peter explaining the GDP, followed by GNI presented by Zach, and PPP presented by Davis.
Gross domestic product is the total market value of all finished goods and services produced within a country in a specific time period. It is the sum of personal consumption, private investment, government expenditure, and net exports and imports within an economy. The figures shown provide some of these values in Australia from June this year. Most noticeably, we see a large reduction in household consumption, which seems to have influenced GDP quite significantly, most likely due to COVID-19. GDP is a comprehensive indicator of a nation's economic conditions and can be used to compare global markets. Generally, a positive GDP indicates a growing economy, whilst a negative GDP indicates a contracting economy. The snapshot shown indicates a GDP rate in Australia this year at negative 6.3%, indicating a contracting economy. When we compare this figure globally, China is well ahead, maintaining a positive GDP rate of 3.2%. However, Australia is still performing above other G7 countries with an average GDP of minus 11.9%, indicating we are doing quite well on a global scale. GDP has for long been a dominant economic indicator. However, several studies have shown that it only reflects economic market goals and not environmental and social goals. An example might be in a high crime rate economy, which will require increased police forces. Whilst this might stimulate GDP growth, it does not account for the poor social environment. Further, GDP does not differentiate between who has produced goods and services. Therefore, goods produced locally for an overseas market might be incorrectly considered.
So, what does GNI stand for? Well, it stands for the gross national income, which is an economic measure of the total amount of money a nation's people and businesses earn year on year. GNI is very similar to GDP in that they are both used to measure and compare different countries' economic wealth and standard of living. However, where GDP focuses on domestic product, the wealth generated within a nation's borders, GNI also includes income generated by its businesses and citizens working overseas, and B, income remitted by foreigners living in that country back home. But it also includes foreign aid. So when calculating GNI, put simply, it is the sum of that nation's GDP plus the net income received from overseas, A minus B, as you can see above. So I'm going to be talking about some examples now where I'm comparing GNI to GDP to show some insight into the economic makeup of these countries. So firstly, Ireland has a lower GNI to its GDP as a result of its low corporation tax rate and high forest that's attracted high foreign investment. However, these multinational corporations then repatriate funds back to their home country, ultimately reducing their GNI. Turkmenistan, on the other hand, has a greater GNI to its GDP, and this can be attributed to having one of the highest levels of remittances, meaning they have a lot of citizens working overseas sending money back home.
So what is PPP? It's purchasing power parity. Purchasing power parity is a measurement of prices in different countries that uses the price of specific goods to compare the absolute purchasing power of the country's currencies. So let's make an example. The price of a Big Mac in China is 25 yuan. In the America is $4. So the Big Mac index should be 6.25 yuan for $1. Suppose the actual exchange rate is 7 yuan for $1. So the dollar is unvalued. When the price of Chinese Big Mac decreases or raising prices in the America, let index equal to real exchange rate, the PPP will be restored. Purchasing power parity is one of the two most common methods of converting GDP into a common currency. The other is market-based exchange rate. Therefore, compared with market-based exchange rate, PPP's advantage is that its exchange rate is relatively stable over a period of time. The disadvantage is that it is difficult to measure.
In order to conclude, it is safe to say that these three economic measurement tools are unique and essential in its own matter. As Zach's interpreted before, the GDP and GNI share similar purposes as monetary measurement tool. However, GNI focus more on total income of a country, while GDP measures the economic growth of a country. On the other hand, Davis PPP is a tool that enables economists to compare different currencies around the world within according to various price points of the selected good, thus translating its purchasing power of that country. Despite of its differences, the three economics method are an excellent tool to determine a country's standard of living. Thank you very much for listening.